For 53 years, the world knew her voice. It never really knew his. While Bonnie Tyler stood on stages from Cardiff to California, belting out lyrics that ended up in a billion streams, there was a quiet, broad-shouldered man standing just outside the spotlight who almost never spoke to cameras, almost never gave interviews, and almost never let his name become part of the story. That changed, in the most painful way possible, on July 8, 2026, when Bonnie Tyler passed away in a hospital in Portugal at the age of 75. And in the days since, as the tributes have poured in from Downing Street to Hollywood, the question fans keep asking isn't just about her music anymore. It's about him. Robert Sullivan. Her husband of more than 50 years. The man who was there before the fame, through all of it, and right up until her final moments. So what has he actually said? What do we know about the man behind one of the most recognizable voices in music history? Stick with me, because this story is quieter than most, but it might be one of the most powerful love stories the music industry has ever produced. Let's start with what actually happened. On the morning of July 9th, a statement appeared on Bonnie Tyler's official website and social media. It read that her family and team were heartbroken to announce that she had unexpectedly passed away the night before, in a hospital in Portugal, as a result of the illness she had been treated for. It was a family statement, issued collectively, the kind of careful, protective wording that grieving families release when they want to share the truth without opening themselves up to a media storm. Robert Sullivan's name wasn't attached to it individually, and in the days since her passing, according to reporting from outlets that have covered the family closely, he has not stepped in front of a camera or given a personal, individual statement of his own. That matters, and it tells you something important about who this man is. Because in an industry where grief is so often performed for an audience, where celebrity spouses are expected to post the perfect tribute within hours of a loss, Robert Sullivan has done something that feels almost radical in 2026. He has simply stayed quiet, stayed present, and let the people who loved Bonnie speak in their own ways instead. But quiet doesn't mean absent. And the story of what he has done, rather than what he has said, tells you everything you need to know about a marriage that outlasted disco, punk, grunge, Britpop, and 3 different decades of tabloid culture. To understand who Robert Sullivan is, you have to go back to 1970, to a nightclub in Swansea, Wales, years before anyone outside of South Wales had ever heard the name Bonnie Tyler. She was still Gaynor Hopkins then, a coal miner's daughter with a big voice, singing in local clubs to make a bit of money. Sullivan was the club manager, a young man with an athletic build and a background that had nothing to do with the music business. Before he ever booked her onto a stage, Sullivan had actually represented Great Britain at the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, competing as a judoka in the half-middleweight division. Think about that for a second. Long before he became known, if is known at all, as the husband of a global pop star, Robert Sullivan was an elite athlete, standing on an Olympic mat representing his country. That's not a footnote. That's a man who had already built one entire identity before he ever became attached to hers. The two of them dated for 4 years, and on July 4, 1973, they got married. Bonnie was 22 years old. This was still 4 years before her breakthrough album, The World Starts Tonight, and a full decade before total eclipse of the heart would turn her into an international phenomenon. And that timing, as Bonnie herself pointed out in interview after interview over the following decades, is the real secret to why this marriage worked when so many celebrity marriages don't. In a 2025 interview with The Times, she explained it plainly, saying that she met her husband when she started singing in nightclubs in Swansea because he was managing the venue at the time. And in reflecting on their decades together, she said something that has been quoted again and again since her death, that the secret to their success was that they met before she was famous. It's a simple line, but it carries enormous weight. Robert Sullivan didn't marry a star. He married a girl from a council house with an outdoor toilet, a girl who sang hymns in chapel and dreamed of something bigger. Everything that came after, the #1 records, the Grammy nominations, the sold-out arenas, happened to both of them, together, rather than to her alone with him along for the ride. After his athletic career wound down, Sullivan moved into property development, and this is where the couple quietly built a life that had almost nothing to do with the music industry. According to Bonnie's own accounts in interviews with The Times over the years, before she'd even had a hit record, Sullivan bought a piece of land in Wales, and the two of them built their first home together, a Georgian-style house, when she was just 22. From there, the property portfolio grew substantially. In the 1970s, Sullivan and a business partner bought land in New Zealand that started as a cashmere goat farm before eventually becoming a working dairy farm. Over the following decades, the couple built a portfolio that reportedly included dozens of properties in Berkshire, England, along with horse stables, and a striking glass-fronted home they built in the Algarve region of Portugal, in the resort town of Albufeira, after knocking down an earlier 5-bedroom property there in 2009. Bonnie herself described her husband as, in her words, very good at investing in property. It's a strange and human detail that one of the most powerful voices of the 1980s spent her offstage life splitting decisions with her husband about goat farms and glass houses. But it's also exactly the kind of grounded, unglamorous partnership that seems to have kept them together for over half a century. The couple split their time between two homes that meant everything to them: a house overlooking the sea in Mumbles, a seaside community on the Gower Peninsula near Swansea, and their residence in the Algarve, the very region where Bonnie would eventually be hospitalized and where she ultimately passed away. In a January 2025 interview, Bonnie described her daily life in Wales with real warmth, saying that when she wasn't touring, she'd sleep in until late morning, and her husband would bring her cups of tea. It's such a small, ordinary detail, and that's exactly why it matters. Behind the leather outfits and the powerhouse vocals and the Eurovision stage in 2013, there was a woman who, at home, was just someone whose husband brought her tea in the morning after more than 50 years of marriage. One of the more painful parts of their story, one that Bonnie spoke about with real honesty in later interviews, was the fact that the couple never had children. She explained that early in their marriage, her career took off and simply kept accelerating, and the two of them kept telling themselves they would try for a family the following year. By the time she felt ready, she was around 39 years old. She became pregnant, but suffered a miscarriage, an experience she described as deeply painful. The couple tried again for roughly 2 years afterward, but it never happened, and eventually they made peace with the fact that parenthood wasn't going to be part of their story. Bonnie later said she considered herself simply unlucky rather than bitter about it, and that she found deep fulfillment in her many nieces and nephews instead, joking that her home in Mumbles was like Paddington Station because everyone wanted to come visit their Auntie Gaynor. It's worth sitting with that for a moment, because it reframes the entire marriage. This wasn't a fairy tale free of hardship. It was a real 53-year partnership that absorbed genuine loss and kept going anyway. There's also a surprising thread that connects Robert Sullivan directly to Hollywood. He is a first cousin, once removed, of the actress Catherine Zeta-Jones, through his relation to her father, David James Jones. Zeta-Jones publicly acknowledged the connection back in 2017, when she shared a video of her family dancing to Total Eclipse of the Heart and revealed that Bonnie Tyler was, in her words, related to the Joneses. In the days following Bonnie's death, Zeta-Jones paid public tribute to her, saying her heart was broken, a rare moment of an A-list Hollywood star acknowledging just how personal this loss was, not just as a fan of the music, but as extended family through Robert Sullivan's side of the tree. Now let's talk about what actually happened in Bonnie's final months, because Robert Sullivan's presence, even without words, runs through every stage of it. In early May of 2026, Bonnie was hospitalized in Faro, Portugal, for emergency surgery after suffering a perforated intestine. She was placed into a medically induced